Welcome to this explainer. If you really look closely at the massive, winding history of money, you'll quickly realize that human civilization has spent thousands of years basically trying to figure out one thing: the absolute perfect way to capture, store, and trade our wealth. And through all of those centuries, one single material has stood head and shoulders above the rest as the ultimate benchmark. From the sacred, glowing religious artifacts of ancient Egypt right up to the ultra-secure, heavily guarded central bank reserves we have today, gold has been the foundational anchor for how we understand wealth. But honestly, that brings us to a massive, fundamental question. Why gold? Out of all the elements, all the minerals, and all the materials available to us on Earth, why did humanity universally choose this specific shiny yellow metal? I can promise you, its 5 millennial run at the absolute top of the economic food chain is absolutely no historical coincidence. It definitely wasn't just some random cultural fad that happened to stick around. Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. We'll start with the perfect store of value, move to the 3 pillars of gold, and then explore anchoring the ancient world. After that, we'll look at the psychology of gold, the fatal flaws of metal, and finally, how it acted as the catalyst for paper money. So kicking things off with Section 1, the perfect store of value and its 5,000 years of dominance. And moving right into Section 2, the 3 pillars of gold, or the science of value. To really understand this, we have to look at the hard chemical and economic justifications for gold's absolute dominance. There are 3 defining pillars you need to know. First is scarcity. Unlike grain or livestock, which you can just breed or grow more of, gold is naturally limited. It takes immense labor and time to extract it from the earth, and that extreme difficulty acts as a natural defense against sudden supply shocks that cause inflation. Second is durability. It's practically indestructible. It simply does not corrode, rust, or decay, period. And third is universality. It was valued across almost every culture, from ancient India and China all the way to the Mediterranean and the Americas, and often completely independently of one another. And this brilliantly illustrates that second point on durability. Picture this. A wooden chest of gold coins goes down in a shipwreck. Centuries pass. The wood completely rots away. The iron cannons rust into nothing. But when divers finally recover those gold coins, they look nearly identical to the exact day they were struck. That is the true meaning of durability. It's the ability to preserve your wealth securely across entire generations. That brings us to Section 3, anchoring the ancient world, which was really the first global bridge. Because of those 3 pillars we just talked about, around the first millennium BCE, a major shift occurred. Gold evolved from merely being a decorative royal symbol, just a fancy thing for kings to wear, into a highly active, practical economic tool. Let's trace this out. By the time of the Roman Empire, gold coins like the Arius were handling large-scale state expenditures and funding entire military salaries. Then, the Byzantine Empire introduced the solidus, a currency so incredibly stable it remained the gold standard, pun intended, for international trade across Europe and the Middle East for centuries. The Islamic world followed with the dinar, allowing commerce to flow seamlessly from Spain all the way to Central Asia. Gold acted as the ultimate bridge. It allowed totally isolated, diverse empires to trade with one another without constantly having to stop and renegotiate what their money was actually worth. The gold itself was the worth. All right, Section 4, the psychology of gold. Is it an illusion of value? Now, what's really interesting here is when we shift from hard history to human emotion, because gold's power is deeply, deeply psychological. It acts like a self-sustaining cycle of trust. Human psychology fundamentally associates gold with power, security, and prestige. Simply put, because our ancestors believed it was valuable, and their ancestors believed it was valuable, it remains valuable today. That profound historical association actively fuels its real-world economic worth right now. Seriously, let me ask you this directly. In an economic collapse, where do you hide your wealth? Think about it. When extreme political unrest hits, or borders close, or banks fail, people instinctively turn to gold as a safe haven. It provides a sense of physical security that completely transcends spreadsheets and digital data. It is, without a doubt, the ultimate global brand of reliability. But here is where the story takes a sharp turn. Section 5, the fatal flaws of metal and how the system eventually breaks. Because despite its absolute brilliance, gold-based systems contained fatal structural flaws. As economies grew faster and got far more complex, the sheer weight of those systems caused them to crack. It's a fundamental mismatch. On one hand, you have rapid economic expansion, more goods, more trade, more people. But on the other hand, you have a strictly fixed gold supply. Remember, the supply of money was tied solely to how fast miners could physically dig gold out of the ground, not how fast the economy was actually growing. So when trade expanded but the gold supply didn't, it caused severe deflation. There literally wasn't enough money. Well, actually scratch that. There wasn't enough physical gold to represent the money, which made transactions incredibly difficult and actively choked global growth. And that created a vicious cycle of physical burden. Expanding global trade naturally created a huge demand for more money, but back then, large transactions meant physically moving massive, incredibly heavy chests of gold across oceans and continents. That meant insanely high risks of theft or sinking, plus exorbitant costs just to guard the money while it was moving. The actual physical logistics of metal actively constrained large-scale economic transactions. It became a massive, literal bottleneck. So the crucial point is this. During crises or wars, governments simply lacked the flexibility to adjust their money supply. They were totally trapped by the metal. This rigidity forced rulers to resort to something called debasement. They would secretly reduce the actual precious metal content of their coins, mixing in cheaper metals just to stretch their limited money supply further. But when the public figured it out, and trust me, they always did, it sparked wild inflation and completely destroyed the very foundation of trust that gold was built upon in the first place. Which leads us directly to our final section, Catalyst for Paper Money and the Evolution of Trust. You see, these massive logistical pressures and rigid supply constraints didn't mean that gold failed. Not at all. Rather, they forced the next great evolution in human history. We had to escape the weight. The desperate need to break free from moving heavy physical metal and to escape a rigidly fixed money supply is exactly what birthed abstract banking and paper money. It allowed the global economy to expand infinitely, leaving physical gold behind as an active day-to-day currency, and transitioning us into a world built entirely on abstract trust. But that leaves us with a pretty unsettling final thought. For 5,000 years, humanity relied on a physical, indestructible anchor to guarantee the value of its labor. If our money today is no longer anchored by that indestructible gold and is instead just an abstract concept of paper and digital numbers floating on a screen, what exactly is securing our wealth? Think about that the next time you tap your card. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I really hope it gave you a powerful new perspective on the true evolution of money.